These notes are over significant figures, and hopefully at the end you will understand this joke. So measurement in science always involves some sort of estimating, and a better instrument or tool will allow for a better measurement because you're able to record a greater number of significant figures. So if we're trying to measure this fish, which ruler is going to be a better instrument to allow for a greater number of significant digits or known values? If we use this first ruler right here, we know this 3, we know 4, 5, 6, 7, but we don't really know anything in between that measure. We know 7.5, it's not quite 7.5. If we're looking here at the second ruler, we know 3, we know 3.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. So we can say that we know with more certainty, if we measure with this ruler, that this fish is 7.1, 5 centimeters long. If we measure with this ruler here, we can say, well, I know the fish is 7.3. And really it's not because he didn't start way over here. But I can't estimate this last digit. With here, I can estimate this last digit, and I get more significant figures. So here's some rules for counting significant figures. Non-zero integers always count as significant figures. So that means 1 through 9. Anytime you see a number 1 through 9, it counts. Zeros get a little more complicated. So our first type of zero is called a leading zero, and it's in front of all the non-zero digits, and they don't count. So if we have a decimal here, this 0 doesn't count, this 0 doesn't count, this 0 doesn't count. So if we're looking at this number here, it has 2 significant figures, just the 2 and the 5. Now, if it had a 0 after this 5, that means it would now have 3 significant figures, because this 0 is after a number and after a decimal place. Captive zeros are zeros between non-zero numbers, so it's like sandwiched in between. So these 2 zeros right here count because they're sandwiched in between these 2 numbers. So this number here has 4 significant figures. Trailing zeros at the end of a number, there's 2 types. If you have your number written in scientific notation, whatever is to the left of the time sign counts no matter what it is. So this number here has 3 significant figures. These 2 are trailing zeros. They don't count. So this number here has 1 significant figure. If I had 100 and I put a decimal here, now we can say, hey, those zeros are sandwiched. They're captive zeros because they're between a number and a decimal. So those would count. And then finally we have exact numbers, which are conversion factors, which we'll talk about later in the week. Okay, so let's practice here. How many significant figures do we have? This one counts because it's a 1. These zeros count because they're sandwiched. This 0 counts because it's after a number and after decimal. So here we have 5 significant figures. 17.10, we have 1, 2, 3. This 0 is after a number and after a decimal, so it counts. So we have 4. This is a comma right here, not a decimal. So these zeros count because they're sandwiched, but this 0 does not count because it's not after a decimal, it's not sandwiched between anything. So this number has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 significant figures. This one here is in scientific notation, so anything to the left of the time sign counts, so it has 3. These zeros don't count because they're leading zeros, so only these 2 count, so we have 2 significant figures. There's no decimal here, these are commas, so the only numbers that count are the 3 and 2, so this has 2 significant figures. All right, so you're never just going to go up and say, oh, I'm going to count these significant figures. We're usually multiplying or adding, subtracting. We're doing math with these. We take a measurement and then we use that measurement in math. So we have rules for addition and subtraction. You're going to find the number with the fewest number of decimal places, and that's what you need to round your answer to. So when you put your math into a calculator, it spits out this long number, and you say, what do I round my answer to? Well, it depends on what you started with. So here we've got these three numbers, and we're going to add them up. And this is what our calculator is going to spit out right here. Okay, what do I round it to? Well, I have to go back and look at what I started with. So this first number has 4 decimal places, the second number has 2, and this third number has 3. Well, I can only round to 1 decimal place because that's my fewest number of decimal places, and that's the rule for addition. So my final number should only have 1 decimal place. So I know I'm going to round to this decimal place, so look to the right of it, that's a 6, so I need to kick that 7 up to an 8. Multiplying division is a little more simple than addition and subtraction. You just, whatever number has the fewest number of significant figures, that's what you round your answer to. Okay, so these practice problems you need to put in your notes, and tomorrow we're going to go over, check your answers and go over them for the warm-up.